What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Fantasy Flex Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Raybon of the Action Network, and this is our QB2 fantasy preview episode. Here to break it down with me, one of the top fantasy rankers in the game, the odds maker, Sean Kerner. What it do, Sean?
What's up? It was you wearing the Colts hat last pod. Now
Yep.
It's me. Does that mean that you think Anthony Richardson should be a QB1?
I think he should. I think he should, if he could
Should I
start.
be taking it as a sign? Oh, okay.
I mean, I wanted to rock the Peyton. I have a few quarterback jerseys, so I was like, all right, I'll get the Peyton. I haven't rocked it, but no, definitely. Definitely pro Anthony Richardson. So,
well, I'm promoting him here. I was just curious if there was an underlying meaning for that.
Not as much as you. I mean, I know you just like you always pick the guy who's like, there's always an underlying meeting. I just try to, see what I haven't worn in a while and throw it into the rotation. But yeah, we're going to talk all of the quarterbacks outside the top 12 here. We'll start with the 13 to 24 range, which is Daniel Jones, Geno Smith, Jared Goff, Richardson, Aaron Rodgers, Russ Wilson, Derek Carr, Stafford, Kyler Murray, Pickett, Love, and Bryce Young at 24. So Sean, we'll go through each of these guys kind of one by one, but just curious, I know you like Richardson, but who kind of stands out the most for you in this range? Is it Richardson or is it somebody else?
Well, it's definitely Richardson, but the guy I think I should talk about is probably Geno Smith, because I was mentioning him last pod how I have him as my QB 11. Right now his ADP is QB 14. He definitely fits in my strategy for one QB league. So does Richardson as well. But Geno Smith, where he's going, sort of allows you to, take a flyer on him. And if he pans out again this year, great. If not, it's not going to kill you. So just when we take a step back and look at Geno Smith, like obviously he was one of the biggest surprises last year. Had a career year at age 32. I mean, he was almost doing nothing for like 6-7 seasons and finishes a QB5. But if you look at all the underlying metrics, I mean, he was solid. It wasn't that fluky. He was 8th in success rate, 6th in QBR. He had the 5th highest catchable ball rate on passes 20 plus yards downfield, actually 1st in on target rate. So he was just really accurate. He has a really good receiving core in DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, but they also added, the first wide receiver drafted in this year's class, Jackson Smith-Njigba. So, the Seahawks are going all in on him, and rightfully so. They gave him a 3-year deal. They didn't draft a rookie QB to test him or anything. So I think the Seahawks believe in him. So that helps me believe in him a little bit more. But like I said, I think he should be kind of the top streaming option to begin the season because he starts against the Rams, Lions, Panthers, and Giants.
Mm-hmm.
All 4 teams finish outside the top 20 in DVOA against a pass last year. So if he does struggle over the first 4 games, I think he's a guy that, we'll cut bait on. And then you just stream somebody else. But, he could continue last year's success. He has all the talent around him to do that. So I think just when it comes to, selecting a QB outside of the top 12, I think he makes the most sense because of all those reasons.
Yeah, and another thing with him I like is he was 8th in rushing yards among quarterbacks last year. So about 21 and a half per game. And, we talk about how important that is. And, he's not giving you a ton, but he's giving you more than most quarterbacks. So I like Geno, and I like what you said about kind of looking at that early season schedule. Cause I think especially when you get into these, this range in one quarterback leagues, like you should be looking at that because the median projection, the whole year projection doesn't matter as much when these guys are kind of replaceable and you're going to be dropping them and adding them and whatnot. So I think the fact that, he starts with a great schedule is definitely a positive for Geno, who is right now the QB 14 by ADP. I like Jared Goff. I like Geno as well. I like Jared Goff as well. I think, Goff he's a QB 15. I have him a couple of spots higher. I love what Detroit is doing with their offense, even with Jameson Williams being out, I think they have depth at receiver. They got Marvin Jones, Reynolds, Mims, like one of those guys should be fine. Or 1 or 2 of those guys should be fine on the outside. You got a pass catching tight end in Laporta. Jahmyr Gibbs going to be one of the most explosive, running back pass catchers in the league. Amon-Ra St. Brown, one of the best receivers in the league. Good offensive line. Another team with, the schedule should be pretty good. I mean, they start with Kansas City. That's always, that's always a nice shootout brewing.
Yep.
So, yeah. And Goff was another one. Just look at all the QB metrics, and he was, top 5, top 7, almost across the board in all the efficiency metrics. And this is not the first time we've seen Goff kind of put up seasons like this. He's had very efficient seasons with the Rams, and Sean McVay just kind of fell out of favor a little bit, but yeah, his schedule is Kansas City, Seattle, Atlanta. So kind of similar boat to Geno here, where you like that. I always talk about Goff in the cold weather. That's where he probably struggles the most. He's only got one true cold weather game at Chicago week 14. Bunch of his road games are indoors, Minnesota, New Orleans, Dallas. And yeah, top number 4 in net yards in attempt last year, 4th in adjusted net yards in attempt, 5 in QBR, 5 in adjusted yards in attempt, 7th in raw yards in attempt, 7th in passer rating, 2nd in interception rate, 2nd in sack rate. Just overall highly efficient, and the offense should be better this year. So don't love pocket passers, but if I have to take one here, Jared Goff is it for me, right along with Geno.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned all their off-season acquisitions and draft capital. I did love the move to bring in Denzel Mims. I mean, why not? I think he's always been sneaky. Just wasn't a good fit on the Jets. So I think he could pop and be that guy that steps up with Jameson Williams out. If not, they should be fine. But I think the key with Jared Goff, and I've been saying it all offseason, is just the fact that offensive coordinator Ben Johnson is staying. I mean, he really established himself as one of the best coordinators in the league. And I bet he ends up getting a head coaching job next year. I would not be shocked. So the fact that he's sticking around for one more season just really gives Goff that continuity to love him. And I think he can build on last year's numbers because, he threw for 29 passing touchdowns last year, which was the second most of his career. But when you consider the Lions scored 52 touchdowns, if he threw an average of 60% of the team's total touchdowns, he would have had 30 plus. So I think we should see some positive touchdown regression with no Jamal Williams there, and just, positive regressions due for this offense in terms of passing touchdowns anyway. So I just love Goff's floor ceiling combo heading into his second season with the Lions.
Yeah, I think he's definitely one of those guys that, like, if it's going to be a pocket passer that's going to sneak into like the top 10, probably, but he's one of the guys at the top of the list. QB. So let's go down the list now. Talk about some of the rest of these guys. Obviously, there's certain guys we also like and certain guys we don't like as much. Let's start with Daniel Jones. He's QB 13 by ADP. I mean, my question to you is, like, how is this giant offense going to work? Are they going to split out the offensive tackles so that they can that they can put like 5 slot receivers on the field and kind of get the like because like all they got is slot receivers and a tight end.
Yeah, I know. As soon as I got word that they brought in Cole Beasley, I had to let you know. Like now they have 103 slot receivers. And I think they're not done. I keep predicting they're going to trade for Hunter Renfrow. I mean, at this point, why not? So I mean, hey, this is good for Daniel Jones because part of his problem has been just every year he starts off with a decent pass catching group and then everybody gets hurt.
Mm-hmm.
So I think having the depth will obviously help Daniel Jones. I think Waller's a huge upgrade. So there's a lot of things to like about Daniel Jones. I mean, he's coming off his best season last year where he's QB9. I think Brian Daboll had a huge part in that. He's a really good coach, can maximize a player like Daniel Jones' value. They brought in Paris Campbell, Jalen Hyatt. I did like those moves, but I think that, QB 13 is a bit rich. That's kind of where I have him projected, but he is going to be pretty inconsistent for a guy being drafted in this range. Plus he sits atop a pretty big tier right here where you can wait and get, similar quarterbacks later, like a Jared Goff. So I think the time to get him was last year. I was looking at our notes last year. We were both raving about Daniel Jones and Jared Goff outside the top 25. Now you have to spend top 15 draft capital. So it's one of those things where, it's about right. But I think this is closer to his ceiling. Like, I don't know if he has top 5 upside, no matter who's, in the offense with Darren Waller and Paris Campbell. So I think QB 13 is a bit rich for me. I rather just wait.
Yeah, I agree. I think, I do like the rushing upside, but I still don't think Waller obviously helps, but I don't think there's like a difference making receiving group in here. And then you look at the schedule, they have a couple of easy games at Arizona in week 2 and at Vegas in week 9, but in between, and Seattle in week 4. But like, they also got Dallas, San Francisco, Miami, Buffalo, Washington, Jets, Dallas again, Washington again, the Patriots before the bye. So it's like they have like a couple of good matchups, but like for every good one, they have like 3 tough ones. So the schedule's not really doing him any favors. He's going to have to get a lot better in terms of the passing efficiency. So yeah, I think last year was definitely the year to invest.
Yep.
This year, if I need him for a spot start, I think, in a 1 QB league, I'm just kind of hoping that, he has a bad week 1 and maybe week 2 against Arizona, you could pick him up or something like that. But not a guy I'm going out of my way to draft in the same way I was last year, because I just think the schedule, when you look at the schedule, I don't see him overcoming that to be consistent, which is kind of what we want if we're investing here. So yeah, not loving Daniel Jones, but the rushing upside, still prefer him over some of the other guys, but he's going at his at a premium at QB 13. So you can't really there's really no value to be had with Daniel Jones. Geno was the QB 14, Goff was the QB 15. Anthony Richardson, that's your guy. You're rocking the Colts hat. Talk to me about Richardson.
Just ever since he landed on the Colts, I've been all about drafting him in this range. Just, it was such a great landing spot for Richardson, and for a few reasons. I mean, the first is he's going to be playing for head coach Shane Steichen, who recently helped engineer the Eagles' prolific offense under Nick Sirianni, and helped develop Jalen Hurts. So I think that's going to be massive that he has probably the right quarterback to kind of get him up to speed with the NFL, because, Richardson's an athletic freak. I mean, he has massive rushing upside, but he probably does need a year or 2 to develop as a passer. So his rushing upside will allow him to produce from day 1 in real life and fantasy. So I think he has Jalen Hurts, Cam Newton type of top 10 upside as a rookie as a result. And another huge reason why I think Indy was such a great landing spot is, he was favored to go to either Seattle or Tennessee, where he would have had a much tougher time getting any playing time year 1. Leapfrogging Geno Smith and Ryan Tannehill is much tougher than Gardner Minshew. So I think even if he doesn't start week 1, he should be starting by like week 4 or 5. So at this ADP, he's going far enough in 1 QB leagues where you could just stash him. If you happen to like punt the position, maybe start streaming week 1, you could take Richardson and stash him. And I think by week 3 or 4, when he's starting, he could be a top 10 type of quarterback with top 5 upside. So I just think he's the kind of guy in this range I definitely want to take a flyer on in 1 QB leagues. If for whatever reason, I don't get a top 8 quarterback, I take Travis Kelce early, I just hit other positions early, he's a nice fallback plan. Even if you do end up with like a Trevor Lawrence or somebody like that, I think you do want to stash a guy like Richardson just because he has so much upside.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really that he has that arm strength, and he has that scrambling, they're going to call design runs for him.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the upside is probably a guy like Jalen Hurts his rookie year. I think he had 3, 4, 5 starts that year and was one of the top quarterbacks. And his downside is probably like Justin Fields year 1, where it never kind of got off the ground. I think,
right.
He had a couple of good games down the stretch, but that is the downside. But I think it's an appropriate risk to take at, QB 15, QB 16, because as we're kind of mentioning, the market's just a lot sharper this year. I mean, Daniel Jones is already going at QB 13, and Goff and all these guys. Like, there's really not as much value to be had the later you go in the draft. So that makes a guy who can potentially put up, numbers similar to the guys we're taking in the top 5, top 6. It makes them more valuable. So yeah, I think Richardson, the median projection just comes down to how many games you're actually projecting him to start. Right now, I mean, yeah, I think, would you say Minshew's the favorite to start week 1?
Ooh, I don't know. I would say it's probably 50-50 at this point. This is one of those things that starting now, we might get a lot more clarity on this sooner than later. But I would not be shocked if Minshew starts the first 2 games, and then Richardson plays the rest of the way. So as of now, I'm projecting Richardson for 13.8 games So that gets me him to like QB 14. But if he's announced as the QB1 starter, I mean, he's going to jump up to probably QB 12, somewhere like that for me. So this is one of those things where his ADP could fluctuate greatly the next couple weeks. But I think either way, he's starting by week 5.
What do you have as a completion percentage? Just because I know that's been a
yikes.
big talk, kind of talking
Yeah,
point.
I have it around 60%. It depends what kind of completions they want him, or attempts they want him throwing, but I think 60% is about right. To be clear, like when he is the starting quarterback, I think it's going to be a pretty big downgrade to the pass catcher. So I think early in the season, if Minshew is starting, I think guys like Michael Pittman, Jelani Woods, Alec Pierce, will offer a lot more value than once Richardson is under center. Not just because he's going to be less accurate, but he's going to scramble a lot more. But his presence obviously has a big impact on the pass catchers as well.
Yeah, I'm around 58%.
58, that's fair.
Yeah. But yeah, so again, I'm not like, I actually feel like passing wise, it probably will look more like Justin Fields year one.
Yeah.
But just that rushing upside. But so I'm hoping he kind of stays in this range, because if he goes to like QB 12, I mean, it's right on. It's still worthwhile for the upside, but it's getting more like the value's getting kind of taken out of it again. That would be the market getting
right.
pretty sharp.
And I think if he does get to QB 12, it'll be because they literally announced that he's the week 1 starter.
Yeah,
and then his ADP will go up there. And at that point, I might back off. I think now is he's not as big of a value as Alexander Madison was when he was like RB35 when we knew Dalvin was probably getting cut. But it's similar where you're just getting ahead of the curve a bit, and getting him at 16 right now, I think is offering value. I'd rather have him over a guy like Aaron Rodgers. So I think right now is the time to get him. And then once he's announced as the week 1 starter and he's the QB 12, that might be time to back off a bit.
Speaking of Rodgers, he is the QB 17, and I know we're both kind of low on him. I just I don't know how much to peg of last. Last year was one of his, like, in many ways, his worst season. I don't know, like, there's obviously part of it's the age, part of it was he was hurt, part of it was he had no Devontae Adams, but this year he's gonna have a really good defense. So even if a lot of it was to do just with the injury, which I don't think, I do think, at this age, there's going to be some natural fall off, but I don't know that he's going to have to, have one of these high volume seasons. So I'm just having trouble kind of getting him to the numbers necessary to get in that top 15. Yeah. What about you?
Yeah, same. His ADP has dropped quite a bit. I feel like it started off at like QB 12 and now it's dropped because everyone's excited. It's exciting seeing future Hall of Fame quarterback change teams so late in their career. I mean, we've seen Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Matthew Stafford end up having like career years after that, but we've also seen it backfire last year with like Matt Ryan and Russell Wilson. I think Aaron Rodgers will be between all those guys, right in the middle. Like, I think he's going to maintain the Aaron Rodgers we know. I think you mentioned all the factors last year. I think one of the big ones was obviously not having a guy like Devontae Adams. So having a guy like Garrett Wilson, I think, will elevate Rodgers, in this offense. But like you said, like, it's more of a lateral move, and the defense is a lot better. He's not going to have to be in many shootouts. The offensive line isn't as good as Green Bay's. So I don't see this as being a huge positive move for Rodgers, but it is a positive move for the Jets, who just had an absolutely awful quarterback situation last year. So I am investing in a guy like Garrett Wilson and Allen Lazard, guys like that. But Aaron Rodgers himself, again, I rather have a guy like Anthony Richardson that has massive upside. I think Jared Goff has a higher floor ceiling combo than Rodgers, so I'm just not getting Rodgers in this range.
Yeah, and he had no top 5 finishes last year. And I could like something like that. I could see that happening again, just with as good as this defense is. Maybe Garrett Wilson will take, but remember, I mean, Christian Watson was balling out at times, just turning little short passes into touchdowns, and he still didn't get a top 5 finish. So also the early schedule for Rodgers is not great either. It plays Buffalo, Dallas, the Patriots, the Broncos, and the Eagles, all in the first 7 or so, 7-8 games of the year. So don't love the schedule. Don't really just another one of these situations where I just not a lot for me that's saying like, draft this guy. He has a ton of upside. It's just kind of a middling guy who should have a decent floor, assuming he doesn't get injured. But I don't think he's going to win you a league, is what I'm saying. All right. The next quarterback is Russell Wilson, QB 18. I'm actually cautiously optimistic about Russ. What do you think about Russ this year?
Yeah, same. I mean, obviously last season was an absolute disaster. But he still finished as the QB 16, and we could chalk it up to coaching and say that, hey, Sean Payton's gonna help him bounce back this year, which I can fully get behind. He still has a ton of weapons, and Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton. I love Greg Dulcich, obviously, and he gets Tim Patrick back, who's always overperformed. I think he's a quality number 3 receiver. So I think QB 18 sounds about right. And yeah, if you want to gamble on him, it's probably worth it because he does have that top 12, top 10 upside. I probably wouldn't take him over Jared Goff or Anthony Richardson, but I think I would take him over, Aaron Rodgers, probably, definitely over Derek Carr and Jordan Love. So in this range, I think that, yeah, I have been in spots where I do take Russell Wilson, because I think he can't get worse than last year, and he still ended up pretty good at the end of the season. So I do believe in Sean Payton turning things around. So I think Wilson's definitely worth a flyer in this range.
Yeah, I agree. I think just because he still has more rushing upside than the usual quarterback, because we have seen him put up, very productive fantasy seasons in years past, and because he did, part of him, finishing his QB, 16 last year, was those last couple of games with when Hackett was out of the picture. He put up 30 fantasy points in back-to-back games to 28 plus fantasy points in back-to-back games to close out the season. He had a 30-point game and then a 29, like a set. Well, yeah, he really did. In the last 4 weeks, he really kind of did have, 3 of his 4 games were 28 or more fantasy points. So he closed out a lot stronger once Hackett was out of the picture. And I think that it, bodes well without even considering Payton, because Hackett's probably just a negative no matter what. Like, so then comparing him to Payton, now the one thing you do worry about is, will there be any kind of shenanigans? Like, remember Payton's old offense, they would throw like a Taysom Hill in there. Like, is anything like that going to happen? But I don't think they have that same kind of player. I mean, they have Kendall Hinton, but I don't think I don't think he's gonna.
Well, we saw how that turned out.
Yeah.
I think Greg Dulcich has a pretty good arm, but I don't think they're going to go that route. Hopefully,
that would be like, there's always little things like that you have to consider. But overall, I think the outlook and this, just everything around him, it just bodes a lot better for him this year. And I think he is kind of sneaky here. Now he does have a good defense, so that's one of the things. But you're playing in that division where the offenses are, Chargers, you got the Chiefs, so maybe it'll kind of even out. But overall, I have him as my QB 15, so I'm a little bit higher on him. I just, once you get in this range, it's I'll still take that little bit of rushing upside too, and he does throw the ball down the field. So cautiously optimistic about Russ this year. Derek Carr, QB 19. I'm not loving him. What do you think?
Yeah, that's how I would describe it. I could get behind somebody taking Aaron Rodgers at QB 17. I really could. Or, Russell Wilson at QB 18, obviously. But Derek Carr at QB 19 just seems ridiculous to me. He was the QB 19 in points per game last year, but he doesn't really carry a high weekly ceiling. So again, it's just a result of a guy that's probably going to play all 17 games. That's where the value comes from. And I love Chris Olave, but he does get a downgrade in pass catching talent going to the Saints compared to the Raiders. He definitely needs Michael Thomas to stay healthy. But once they get to the red zone, he's still, we were talking about Taysom Hill shenanigans. Derek Carr has to deal with those when they get in the red zone. So, Taysom Hill is going to steal some snaps under center once they get to the red zone. So I think he might have a lower floor than other type of pocket passers just because of that. So, he could still end up finishing as a top 20 quarterback, again, just due to volume by playing all 17 games, but it's not going to feel like that. He's not going to provide your fantasy team with a ton of value. So I think that Definitely off of him in one quarterback leagues. There's no reason we should be taking him. But even in 2 QB super flex formats where he's the type of guy that I like getting, like he just doesn't do it for me. He just, he's an average quarterback that's going to have to deal with, a backup kind of quarterback tight end like Taysom Hill. And then he has a pretty good backup in Jameis Winston. So I know they paid Derek Carr a lot of money, but we've talked about, I mean, he doesn't have a complete lock on the job. So he just has a lot more paths to a floor than we're used to seeing with them, that I'm definitely off of him as QB19. He would have to fall outside the top like 22 or 23 for me to consider him.
Yeah, that's where I have him at 22. And that's probably even because of volume too, because a lot of quarterbacks in this range, you're just not sure exactly how much they're going to start. But I totally agree. And on top of that, he's just never really been all that successful with, switching offenses and going. I know Gruden's kind of being a mentor. He's consulting with the team or whatever. But overall, Derek Carr's, all the times it's happened 4 times where he's been in year 1 of a new offense. Those have been his worst seasons efficiency wise in the NFL. So that's also something to kind of keep in the back of your head as well. In addition to, like you said, just Taysom Hill potentially taking some snaps from him in the red zone. So yeah, Derek Carr. Yeah, there's probably a floor there, but there's the ceiling. I don't see it for Carr at all. Stafford is 20, and I would take him over Derek Carr. I mean, I just think the defense is going to be pretty bad here for LA. What do you think?
Yeah, I would definitely take him over Derek Carr. And, he dealt with, a ton of injuries last year that shut him down, but none are really expected to have an impact on his 2023 campaign. So I think we could just consider him fully healthy. He's been a grinder in the past. I mean, he's played through some pretty severe injuries. So I don't think we need to consider it as some injury risk. So I think he's going to bounce back and have a good season. And like you said, the defense is going to take a big step back. They're probably going to be throwing it a lot more. Cooper Kupp's going to be fully healthy. So there's a lot of reasons to like Stafford in this range. Like, again, he probably doesn't have top 10 upside, but certainly, he's going to provide you with some high scoring weeks. And he's obviously just a 2 QB super flex type of play, but definitely like having him over, Derek Carr, Jordan Love, Kenny Pickett type. So I think that if you can get him in this range, it makes a ton of sense.
Yeah. I think Cooper Kupp, obviously that's a big one, because Kupp missing time, that kind of distorts the perception of the whole offense. But if he's back, that does raise Stafford's ceiling a little bit. Probably not to the level where they had Odell Beckham and whatnot, but I think if you're going to take a pocket passer in here, might as well take the shot at a guy whose defense could be bad and who we've seen put up big numbers in the past. Then 21 is Kyler Murray. And with him, I guess it comes down to like, how much do we think he's going to play? Because I mean, 21, he could still fall short of that ADP if he doesn't play enough games. So where do you have Kyler for this year?
Yeah, so it's not looking good. I think he could easily miss, the first 6 games or so. And plus, once he does return, we just have to remember he's coming back from surgery on his ACL and his meniscus. So even when he does come back, he's not going to have probably the same rushing upside that we're used to seeing. So that's going to hurt even once he does return. But in the meantime, it's going to be some combo of Colt McCoy or Clayton Tune starting. So they could be 0-6 by the time he's healthy enough to return. And at that point, why force it? The Cardinals are clearly, positioned to tank this year and have the number 1 overall pick next year. We'll see what happens if they land in that spot, but it just wouldn't make sense to rush Kyler back at that point. And even if he does, I don't know if he's going to be the QB1 that we think of him, because he won't have that same rushing upside. So I'm passing on him. There are some spots, if you're in a league with an IR slot, you draft them late and you just stash them on the IR. Sure, I can get behind that. But QB 21 is a bit rich when it comes to like best ball, especially, or 2 QB super flex league. So he's a guy I'm a bit lower on. I have QB 25 because of the games missed, and because of just the potentially limited upside once he is back and healthy.
Yeah, and no DeAndre Hopkins this year. I mean, that's his numbers with and without Hopkins are pretty pretty stark. He's averaging about a yard per attempt less without Hopkins, around 6.5. And that, he was very inefficient last year, and something like that, given that he has an injury, given that their top receivers are pretty small, and then they have no DeAndre Hopkins, and Ertz, who knows when he'll be back. It's going to be a struggle, I think, throwing the ball. So if he can't use his legs like he normally does, he could just be like an inefficient, bad quarterback, like even when he's starting for this year, because the passing is not going to, throwing the ball is not going to be easy for the Cardinals this year. I don't think. Just doesn't, nothing kind of, unless Michael Wilson is just a beast or something, like somebody has to really break out unforeseen for them to, I think, have even an average pass game. So the only way I draft Murray, he would have to be my QB3. So and maybe if it's like a 10-team league and you're getting 21, okay, but I think there are better ways you could spend the pick if you need for sure, QB2 in this range. Kenny Pickett is QB 22, and last year just the passing touchdowns were not there for him. Do you see that kind of regressing this year and him holding on to the job and taking a step forward, or are you kind of what are you thinking for Kenny entering year 2?
I mean, the passing anything just weren't there last year. He is so tough to project for me. I definitely want to hear where you have him, because he's the guy I'm struggling the most. He and Jordan Love probably the most in this range. Just, for having so many weapons in the passing game, it was shocking how bad he was as a passer last year. I mean, he threw for less than 200 yards in 6 of his 10 full games, never threw for multiple touchdowns in a game. Now he does have some decent rushing upside, and he tapped into that last year, but it's certainly not enough to make up for the lack of passing stats we saw last year. He was the only quarterback taken in the first round last year, but it was a very weak class. So I don't think by any stretch he's some like Trevor Lawrence type of prospect that we have to bank on breaking out in year 2. So it's very tough to project. I also don't like the fact that they stuck with Matt Canada. I think he really, prevents this offense from really hitting its ceiling. Because, like I said, there's a ton of talent here, but he does tend to hold them back a bit. So he could make a big year 2 leap and provide value here. I'm just not buying into it yet. I think the way to kind of invest in his potential year 2 breakout is just buy low on guys like Deontay Johnson specifically and George Pickens. Like, I think you're getting them cheap enough where if he does break out, great, they're going to have massive value at those spots. And if he doesn't, they should still be fine. So I think I'm not really investing in Pickett specifically, but I think those 2 receivers are cheap enough, though. If you do think he is going to break out, like they're providing some value. But his projection specifically, I mean, you alluded to keeping the job. There's a chance he loses that, right? So, he's really tough to project. I have him a little bit lower. He's my QB 23, but again, he has so much talent around him. It's hard to see him continuing to struggle this bad. But I didn't see any encouraging signs last year. How about you?
No, and I mean, I like watching him play. Like the eye test, he looks solid, but I think it's part of it is that Matt Canada offense, and Matt Canada came out and said, like, it's not me, it's the organization. Like he's like, I want to open things up, and they want to play a certain way. So he kind of threw everyone else under the bus, which is kind of telling, but it kind of makes sense because we're like, why are they bringing him back? It's because he's willing to do this. Run this kind of offense in the first place. So yeah, I don't. He's a really tough projection. I have him QB 22, but like a lot of that could change with the games played projection. Like I'm for 15, but I know they signed Trubisky to a pretty lucrative, backup deal, so he could always step in. And then the fact that he's not like a top 5 lottery pick. The aging curve, it's not necessarily going to be like, you're not necessarily making as big of a jump from year 1 to year 2 as you are for some of those guys. So, something we just have to kind of pay attention, see how it's going in the off season. But overall, yeah, I don't expect the Steelers to really be one of those teams that is super pass friendly, just because they don't want to be like that's just end of the story, is they don't really just want to be one of those teams. So I think you're always going to be dealing with a cap ceiling for a guy like Kenny Pickett. The QB 23 is Jordan Love, and first year starting for the Green Bay Packers. What's your outlook for him? I mean, another kind of interesting projection because he's had time in this league, just hasn't played much. But he's also not a first round talent either. So what are you looking at for him in this year?
Yeah, the thing with Love is, we haven't seen him play much, so he is kind of an unknown heading into year 3. But he does have a ton of experience, backing up Aaron Rodgers. It's kind of how Aaron Rodgers started. So he could be a lot more seasoned and polished than we think. He has played extensively in preseason the past couple years, and I did like what I saw. He's pretty decisive. He knows how to lead receivers, throws with anticipation. He does have, rushing upside. He has all the things I think we want in a fantasy quarterback. So I'll be watching him closely this preseason. So I think that getting him this late is certainly worth a flyer to here or there. But I am worried about just his inexperienced wide receiver and tight end group. That's really my struggle right now is, Christian Watson, he seems like a stud. I mean, he took that one pass from Jordan Love 6 yards of the house in prime time. So I think that like a guy like Christian Watson can help Jordan Love, but he's going to be relying on Romeo Doubs. I know we love Doubs, but he's still pretty inexperienced. Jayden Reed isn't quite polished at receiver yet, and he's probably going to be thrusted in the slot role right away. And they have Luke Musgrave as a rookie tight end. They have a couple rookie tight ends. So it's just the inexperience surrounding him makes it really tough to think he's going to just tear it up this year. But, I think he does have talent, and he does have that rushing upside where he's not worth completely fading here. But I think QB 23 sounds about right.
Yeah, and he should play. Like, there's no reason to bench him. You do want to. So, leagues where you need like a guaranteed starter in that second quarterback slot or best ball, I bump him up a couple spots because I think, even a guy like Pickett, like you're not sure exactly how many games he's going to start. Guys outside this range, you really don't know. But I do think that this is like almost unprecedented in terms of the inexperience. When you go on, Love have only thrown a few, not many passes in the league, and then all like the second year starting wide receivers probably gonna have a rookie starting tight end. It's there's gonna be some miscommunications. Maybe he's a good bet to lead the league in interceptions. That's actually
that now we're talking. I love it because he has no competition. Like Sean Clifford, 5th round quarterback, awful.
Danny Etling,
awful. They're all bad. So he's going to play all 17 games.
Yes.
There's going to be some miscommunications. It doesn't matter if he leads the league in picks. They're going to play him anyway. So that is a good bet to make. I'll have to go check that market out.
Yeah.
But the one thing that does worry me is, Christian Watson is a stud, but he was banged up all last year. So if Watson does miss time, it just makes the situation even worse, which would only lead to more interceptions. So I do like Jordan Love as a talent, but that does seem like the market to kind of invest in him.
Yeah, and like that, this QB 23 rank, or ADP, like I think again that's because we're not really projecting him to miss many games. So depending on the type of league you're in, like I think in a best ball where you don't want missed games, I think he's valuable. But like if you're in like a different type of league, I think there are some quarterbacks where if you want more risk, some of these guys going after him might be better options here. Bryce Young is a QB 24, and we'll start doing our rookie report episodes next week. So we'll have one on quarterbacks. So we'll talk about it more in depth, but just kind of your general thoughts on Bryce Young here at QB 24.
Oh, I do like him here. He's my QB 20. So I think he offers enough upside to really take as a low end QB2. He had a very productive career at Alabama. The first Alabama quarterback to win the Heisman, the first one to throw back-to-back 3,000 seasons. So he was the number 1 overall pick for a reason. And he's very similar to Kyler Murray in that he's small, he's athletic. He doesn't scramble as much as Kyler. So I don't think he has that type of fantasy upside, but he's a much more polished passer than Kyler was, and maybe is currently. But just know that he doesn't use his legs as much. But as a rookie, I think he will probably scramble a lot more than he probably wants to, just because I don't think he has great talent around him. So I think he's going to lean on his legs a bit more, giving him some nice upside. I think at this point, it does look like he will start week 1 over Andy Dalton, although we talked about Andy Dalton looked great last year. So this does hinge on him kind of being the starter right away. But I think at QB 24, I love the upside. Definitely more than CJ Stroud. CJ Stroud's more of a pocket passer, probably going to have a tougher time transitioning to the NFL. So I think out of, those two guys, Bryce Young's the one for me because I think he will tap into that rushing upside a bit more as a rookie.
Yeah, I was always on team Bryce Young over Stroud. I know there was some debate, but I love the player. I do think, there is a chance, obviously, take some hits, get hurt, but there is like kind of all the, as a passer, I think he has the most upside in year 1. More so than a guy like Richardson or a guy like Stroud, and just in terms of a passer. So, the supporting cast isn't great. So, we'll see. I think they are depending on like Thielen or one of those guys to come through for them. But overall, I think there's a lot of talent here. I think he will run more than Stroud. And again, like in this range, like, Jordan Love is like the safe option, but I think Bryce Young is worth taking on. I think there's more talent there. So the risk, the passing numbers probably aren't going to be too dissimilar between both of them. So I don't mind taking the risk on Young, especially if we get word that he's starting week 1, because it doesn't really make sense to bench him for, even though Andy Dalton's one of those guys that like he can spot start better than most guys in this league. Like it doesn't really make sense to bench Bryce Young if you do start him week 1, because you just want him to take his lumps and learn the position. So definitely think he could be worth the risk in this spot. Okay, what about guys outside the top 24? Anyone you like in that range?
Oh yeah. And again, I'm not going too far off the path here. I'm going with Brock Purdy, who's at QB 25 right now. It sounds like he'll be the week 1 starter if healthy. And breaking news today.
Yep.
John Lynch said he's cleared and ready to go. So that's very good news. And last year he was QB9 in his 6 starts. He's the perfect fit for the Kyle Shanahan offense that always tends to boost how good the quarterback is. And he has Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle. But the one thing about Brock Purdy that we didn't see as much last year is he is actually he's a sneaky good runner. He rushed for over 30 yards 24 times in college. And we have to remember they include sacks. So it was pretty impressive, like how often he ran and how good he was. He's a similar height, weight, 40 time as Patrick Mahomes. So I think he has similar rushing upside as like a Patrick Mahomes. But one of the unique things about Purdy is, when it comes to his 40 time, the first 10-yard split was 1.55 seconds, which is 95th percentile. That's why he is so good at evading pressure. I mean, we saw that game with him together in New York, the wild card game, where he went across the field like 3 different times and Brandon dropped the touchdown. But we didn't see that as much last year. But I think with a full off season, with maybe the 49ers being more comfortable with him running around, I think last year they kind of put the cap on that because they couldn't afford him to get hurt. We have yet to see Purdy at his like ceiling, I think. So I don't think he was just a flash in the pan last year. I think like he's that good in this scheme, and he could provide even more value in fantasy if he does tap into his rushing upside a bit more. So I think even at QB 25, I think he's offering a ton of value.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think he's the one that sticks out, especially with the news that we just got. Yeah. His ADP is obviously going to jump up, but he should be inside the top 20 quarterbacks just based on the supporting cast in itself. That's everywhere he's throwing the ball pretty much. He's going to have a plus receiver, and you touched on it perfectly. He can move around as well, so he has everything we want. So now that we're getting news, I think he's the guy you bump up. He should definitely be going before a guy like Kyler. Like I don't see why you would take Kyler over him, given what we know at this point. So yeah, I mean Purdy would be the number 1 for me too. I think some other guys that are sneaky, Ryan Tannehill, I think is sneaky because he's another guy who runs a little bit more than the average quarterback, and we've seen him put up some very efficient seasons in the past. And now, if Hopkins is just Hopkins, maybe doesn't even have to be prime Hopkins, but if he's just Hopkins, normal kind of just past his prime Hopkins, Traylon Burke takes a step forward in year 2. Chig takes a step forward in year 2. Tannehill could go right back to, that like hyper efficient, high 7s, low 8s yards per attempt. like very successful in the red zone type of quarterback. So as long as he's starting, and I don't think they're tanking the season or anything. So I think Tannehill will open the year as a starter. I think he could be sneaky. And I guess like the poor man's version of a guy like Purdy is probably a guy like Desmond Ridder, right? Like he's gonna have a lot of talent. He's gonna be thrown to a lot of talented guys too. It's just with him, we don't know quite how good he is. Like the jury is out on him, but I'm willing to kind of at least take a flyer on him if I need a quarterback in that range, because you're throwing to Bijan and Pitts and London and Patterson's still there, and the line is good. Arthur Smith is the one who made Tannehill into like a fantasy viable quarterback at first. So I think Ritter's the other guy that kind of stands out a little bit to me, just as a flyer.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't have the same rushing upside that Marcus Mariota has, obviously. But, last year we were using Mariota as a streamer.
Yep.
Good DFS type of play. So I think Ritter's similar, where he will tap into his rushing ability. And he does have, some elite pass catching talent around him, and Drake London and Kyle Pitts. And Bijan Robinson is a fantastic pass catching back. So I think just based on the situation, I think Ridder will have a pretty long leash too. I think they want to see what he's got. We already know what Tyler Heineke is. So I think they'll give Ridder a long leash. So where he's going, I think he has enough upside to warrant some flyers right there.
Yes, sir. All right. That's going to do it for our QB2 pod. To recap, Sean, you like Geno Smith in that QB2 range. I like Jared Goff. Well, we both like Geno Smith and Jared Goff, put it that way.
Let's face it.
Yeah. We both love Brock Purdy right outside the top 25. As well, we're both pretty low. Not really loving Aaron Rodgers this year,
or Derek Carr.
So yeah, that's kind of the summary here, and we'll start diving into these rookies more in the coming weeks, and we'll start doing our rookie report with the running back and wide receiver positions next week. So stay tuned for that. Our fantasy rankings are up at actionnetwork.com, so be sure to check those out, as well as all of our other positional preview episodes right here on the Fantasy Flex channel. You can find Sean on Twitter at @the_oddsmaker, and I am at Chris Raybon, and you can find us at those same handles on the free award-winning Action Network app. Until next time, let's get this shmoney.